All right. Welcome back to musicmoose.org. And we've covered a lot here in some of these first fundamental lessons with the acoustic guitar. And we brought you up to major chords in the first position. And we haven't really touched on the minor chords yet, so we'll do a little brief explanation on the difference between a major and minor chord. Okay, and I'm going to just go ahead and start with E. And the difference between the major and the minor chord is when what makes that minor different is that if you were to walk your scale, your 8 notes in the octave, your third note will actually be flatted and your 7th note will be flatted. So it gives it that minor sound. Some people say it gives it a sadder sound, difference between a happy sounding chord and a sad sounding chord. If I was to play E major and then I was to play E minor, if I went ahead and flatted that third note of the scale in the E chord, that means I would take my A flat and make it G. Okay, so I just took my index finger off the A flat note in the E chord, from E to E minor. You can hear that difference of maybe it's a darker sound or sad sound like I had mentioned. E major, E minor. So you've got your major and minor chords, and a lot of times you'll notice getting more into progressions of songs where a minor chord will come in sometimes in the substitute of the 4 chord or the 5 chord. And let's see, showing you an example from E to E minor. And if I was to play a minor chord in context, just say we'll go back to G now. And if I was to do the G to C to G, instead of the 5 chord, instead of the D right away, we'll go ahead and do an E minor chord and then come back to G and then D. And so you'll notice further down the line in some more song progressions where these things come into play in substitute. It kind of changes the whole feel of a song a little bit, the sound of the progression, and gives you more to work with. So let's see. We'll do a G, C, G, E minor, G, D, G. 1, 2, 3, 4. And C. And G. E minor. G. And D. Minor, back to G, D, and back to G. Now, some of these minor chords you'll notice, like I was starting with the major chord in G and throwing that E minor in there later on. Now, of course, if I was to want to play a 1-4-5 in the minor key, starting in minor, now I'll just go ahead and use E minor for that progression. Okay, 1-4, 1-5, and your 4 chord, your A chord we're going to make that an A minor also. So your first 2 chord changes will be E minor and A minor, back to E minor, and then a regular B major. So you can see that gives the first half of the progression kind of a darker sound, and then when it turns around on the 5 chord, it's back to that major, and it gives it a little bit of a change of mood, perhaps you want to call it. So we'll go ahead with the E minor. 1, 2, 3, and A minor. E minor. B So there you have a 1-4-5 progression out of a minor key with a major 5-chord turnaround, the turnaround being the very last chord change of the progression. And you can see the difference between that darker sounding progression and the lighter, happier sound of the E or the E minor. So, like we had mentioned before, we hope you're following along and got some chord charts and plowing through a lot of these guitar chords on your own, besides here with these lessons. And continue your journey in guitar instruction. So I think in the next section we'll incorporate some more minors and work into a minor scale, just like we did with the major scale. So we hope to see you in the next lesson, friends. musicmoves.org